The next morning, Ikin made a call to Nneka. "Hello, my love," he said, keeping his voice light. Nneka's tone immediately softened. "Ikin, I've missed you so much." "I've missed you too, my dear," he lied. "Listen, I have great news. I've decided to return home earlier than planned. And I want to throw a special party in your honor." "A party?" she asked excitedly. "Yes," he said. "I want everyone to come and celebrate you. You deserve it." "Oh, Ikin, that's so sweet of you," she gushed. "I can't wait." Ikin smirked. "Neither can I." That evening, Neca gathered the house staff. "We are hosting a grand party in 2 days," she announced, standing in the center of the living room. "Everything must be perfect. Do you hear me?" "Yes, madam," they answered in unison. She clapped her hands. "I want the floors shining, the windows spotless, and the food prepared with precision. I do not want to see a single mistake." She turned to Chief Obinna, who stood humbly at the side. "And you, Poro," she said coldly. "Make sure the gate is properly managed. If anything goes wrong, I will personally see to it that you are fired." Chief Obinna bowed slightly. "Yes, madam." She didn't know it, but her time was running out. The night of the party arrived. The mansion in Oji was decorated beautifully, with golden lights illuminating the grand hall. Guests arrived in expensive cars, dressed in their finest clothes. Neca was in her element, greeting everyone with warmth and laughter. To the outside world, she was the perfect wife, gracious, charming, and kind. But Ikin knew better. He watched her closely, waiting for the perfect moment. Then it came. Chief Obinna, still disguised as the humble gateman, deliberately made a small mistake. He took a little longer than usual to open the gate for one of the guests. And that was all it took. "Poro!" Neca snapped loudly, her voice carrying over the party. "What is wrong with you? Do you think my guests have time to wait for your slow hands?" Chief Obinna bowed his head. "I'm sorry, madam." "You're always sorry," she hissed, her tone full of irritation. "Honestly, I should have fired you weeks ago. You are a useless old man." The guests, who had been laughing and chatting, suddenly stopped. They turned toward Neca, their faces filled with shock. Ikin took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Enough," he said, his voice firm. Neca spun around, confused. "Ikin." He walked past her and stopped beside Chief Obinna. Then he did something that stunned everyone. He took his father's hand and turned to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice steady. "Let me introduce you to someone very important." He paused for a moment, letting the tension build. "This man is not just a gateman." He looked at Neca, his expression unreadable. "He is my father." Gasps echoed throughout the room. Neca's face turned pale. What?" Ikin's eyes burned with disappointment. "You have spent the past weeks treating my father like dirt, shouting at him, insulting him, humiliating him. You thought he was just a poor old man." The room was silent, every eye on Neca. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Ikin took a deep breath. "You have shown me who you truly are, Neca. And it breaks my heart." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Ikin, I didn't mean." He held up a hand, stopping her. "No more excuses." The guests murmured among themselves, shaking their heads. Neca had embarrassed herself in front of them all. She fell to her knees. "Ikin, please," she sobbed. "I will change. I promise. Just give me another chance." Ikin looked at her, his heart torn. But deep inside, he knew some things couldn't be undone. The grand hall of the Oji mansion was silent. The guests stood frozen, their eyes darting between Ikin and Nneka, who was still kneeling on the marble floor, her tears falling freely. Ikin's chest felt heavy. He had once believed in this woman, trusted her, loved her. But now, all he felt was disappointment. Neca, he said finally, his voice low but firm. You did not just disrespect my father. You disrespected everyone in this house. You looked down on those who served you, treating them as if they were nothing. And all along, you pretended to be someone you're not. Please, she begged, reaching for his hand, but he took a step back. Tell me, Neca, he continued, his voice edged with sorrow, if you could speak this way to an old man you thought was just a worker, how do I know you truly love me? How do I know you don't just love my wealth? Neca shook her head violently. No, Ikin. I love you, I swear. I didn't know it was your father. I was just frustrated. Chief Obinna, who had remained quiet until now, let out a small sigh. Frustration does not make a person cruel, my daughter. You see, kindness is not something you show only when it is easy. It is what you do when no one is watching, when you think it does not matter. The guests murmured in agreement. Some shook their heads, disgusted by what they had witnessed. Others whispered among themselves, clearly shocked. Ikin turned to them and raised his hand. I thank you all for coming. But this party is over. Slowly, one by one, the guests began to leave. A few close friends patted Ikin on the back, offering him silent support. Others glared at Neca as they walked past her, their judgment clear. The only people who remained were the household staff and Neca, still on the floor, sobbing into her hands. Chief Obinna placed a hand on his son's shoulder. We should go, my son. There is nothing more to say. Ikin looked at Neca one last time, pain flashing in his eyes. Then he turned away and walked toward the staircase. Ikin, she screamed, scrambling to her feet. Please, don't do this. I will change, I promise. He didn't stop. Chief Obinna followed, his face unreadable. For Neca, the reality of the situation hit her like a heavy weight. She had always been the center of attention, the woman admired by all. But now she was alone. Her mask had finally shattered. Ikin sat in his room that night, staring at nothing. He should have felt relief. The truth was out. He had finally seen who Neca really was. But all he felt was emptiness. He had spent years building a life with this woman. And now, it all felt like a lie. There was a soft knock on the door. Come in, he said quietly. The door opened, and Chief Obinna stepped inside. My son, he said gently. How are you feeling? Ikin let out a dry laugh. How do you think I feel, Papa? Chief Obinna nodded, walking over to sit beside him. Pain is not easy to carry. But it is better than carrying lies. Ikin leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I loved her, Papa. I really did. I know, his father said softly. But love cannot stand on its own. It needs respect. And Neca has shown you that she does not have it. Ikin closed his eyes. I don't know what to do. His father sighed. Then ask yourself this, can you truly continue a life with a woman who looks down on people? A woman who speaks kindly only when she benefits from it? Ikin knew the answer. He just wasn't ready to say it out loud. The next morning, Neca woke up with swollen eyes. She hadn't slept. She had cried, tossed and turned, and begged herself to wake up from this nightmare. But no matter how many times she pinched herself, she was still in the same reality. Ikin was avoiding her. He hadn't spoken to her since the party. She had knocked on his door late at night, but he hadn't answered. She had asked the housekeeper, Kamsi, if he had eaten. Kamsi had simply nodded and walked away. No one in the house looked at her the same way anymore. For the first time in her life, Nneka felt powerless. She changed into a simple dress and went downstairs, determined to find Ikin. She found him in the garden, sitting under the large mango tree, staring at the ground. Slowly, she approached. "Ikin," she whispered. He didn't look up. She swallowed hard. "Please talk to me." There was a long silence. Then he finally spoke. "I don't know if I can trust you, Neca." Her heart clenched. "I will prove it to you," she said quickly. "I will change. I will be better. Just, don't leave me." Ikin finally looked at her, his eyes tired. "Do you think words can undo everything you've done? Do you think saying, 'I will change' will erase the way you treated my father? The way you treated everyone in this house?" Neca's lip trembled. I didn't know it was him. That's the problem." Ikin snapped, standing up. "You shouldn't have to know someone's status to treat them with respect." She stepped back, fear in her eyes. She had never seen Ikin this angry before. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. "Neca, I loved you. I wanted to believe in you. But now, I don't know if I can." Tears streamed down her face. "Ikin, please, give me a chance to prove myself." He was silent for a long moment. Then, finally, he sighed. "I don't know if I can trust you again," he said. "But if you truly want to change, it won't be with words. It will be with actions." Neca nodded quickly. "I will show you. I will do whatever it takes." Ikin looked at her one last time before turning away. Deep down, he wanted to believe her. The morning was quiet in the Oji mansion. The air felt heavy, as if the house itself knew that something had changed. Neca sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. Her mind replayed Ikin's words over and over again. "I don't know if I can trust you again, but if you truly want to change, it won't be with words. It will be with actions." All her life, she had been surrounded by wealth, privilege, and admiration. She had never once thought about what it was like to be on the other side, to be the one serving instead of the one being served. She had taken everything for granted. And now she was on the verge of losing the one person she truly loved. A knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Madam," a soft voice called. It was Kamsi, the housekeeper. Neca wiped her tears quickly and cleared her throat. "Come in." Kamsi entered the room hesitantly, her hands clasped together in front of her. She looked nervous, as if she wasn't sure if she should be there. Neca sighed. She had done this. She had made people afraid of her. "What is it, Kamsi?" she asked gently, trying to sound different from the person she had been before. Kamsi hesitated. "Sir Ikin asked me to let you know that breakfast is ready." Neca nodded. "All right. Thank you." She expected Kamsi to leave immediately, but the housekeeper lingered for a moment. "Is there something else?" Neca asked, raising an eyebrow. Kamsi bit her lip before speaking. "Madam, I just wanted to say, I hope you truly mean it when you say you want to change." Neca blinked, taken aback. "I've worked in many houses," Kamsi continued, her voice calm but firm. "And I've seen many people like you. Some change, but most don't." Neca felt a pang of shame. "And what do you think about me?" Kamsi looked her in the eye. "I think you have a long way to go." With that, she turned and left the room. Neca sat there, stunned. She had always thought of Kamsi as just a servant, someone who should obey without question. But today, she realized that Kamsi had more wisdom than she ever gave her credit for. And she was right. Neca had a long way to go. When she walked into the dining room, she found Ikin sitting at the table, sipping his coffee. He barely glanced at her as she sat down across from him. The silence between them was thick. Finally, she cleared her throat. "Good morning." Ikin nodded but didn't respond. She picked up her fork but hesitated. "Ikin, can we talk?" He set down his cup and looked at her. "Talk about what?" She swallowed. "About us. About how I can fix this." Ikin sighed. "Neca, this isn't something you fix in a day. It's not a matter of saying the right words. It's about proving yourself, day by day." "I know," she whispered. "But where do I even start?" Ikin studied her for a moment, as if trying to decide if she was truly serious. Then he leaned forward. "Start with the people you hurt." Neca frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, "if you want to change, start by treating the staff with kindness. Show them respect. Apologize if you must. But don't just say you've changed, show it." Neca's chest tightened. She wasn't used to apologizing. She wasn't used to lowering herself. But maybe that was the problem. She nodded slowly. "All right. I'll do it." That afternoon, Neca stepped into the kitchen. The staff members were gathered there, chatting as they prepared food. When they saw her, they fell silent. She started, struggling with the words. "I just wanted to say, I know I haven't treated you well. And I want to change that. I know my words alone won't mean much," she continued, forcing herself to hold their gazes. "But I'm going to do better. I'm going to start treating you with respect." Then Kamsi stepped forward. "We'll believe it when we see it," she said simply. Neca nodded. "That's fair." She turned and walked out of the kitchen, her heart pounding. It was the first step. And she had a long road ahead. That evening, she found Chief Obina sitting outside near the gate. He was no longer pretending to be the gateman, but he still sat in the same spot where he had observed her all those weeks. She walked up to him hesitantly. "Papa Obina," she said softly. He turned to her, his face calm but unreadable. She swallowed hard. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I want to say I'm sorry. Truly." Chief Obina studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Time will tell if your heart is true," he said. She looked down. "I understand." For the first time in a long time, she felt small. But maybe that was what she needed. Maybe she needed to break down everything she had built, the pride, the arrogance, the cruelty, so she could build something new. Back inside, Ikin watched her from the window. For the first time, he saw something in Nneka that gave him a small sliver of hope. But he wasn't ready to believe in her just yet. This was only the beginning, and time would reveal the truth. The days in the Oji mansion felt different now. The air was thick with unspoken words and the weight of everything that had happened. Nneka tried to adjust to her new reality, but it wasn't easy. She had spent years believing that she was above the people who worked for her. Now, she had to learn how to treat them with respect. And it was harder than she had imagined. She stood in front of the mirror, staring at her own reflection. She had always seen herself as powerful, as someone others admired. But now she saw something else. She saw a woman who had been blind to her own faults. Taking a deep breath, she turned away from the mirror and stepped out of the room. In the kitchen, Kamsi and the other staff were preparing breakfast. The smell of freshly baked bread filled the air. Nneka hesitated in the doorway. She had never stepped into the kitchen unless it was to give orders. Now, she was here for something entirely different. The staff noticed her immediately. Kamsi raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Nneka cleared her throat. "Good morning." A few of them mumbled a response, but most of them simply continued their work. She shifted uncomfortable. I was wondering if I could help. The room fell silent. Kamsi crossed her arms. You want to help? Nneka nodded. Yes. One of the younger staff members, Ada, glanced at Kamsi uncertainly. What do we do? Kamsi sighed. Give her something simple. Ada hesitated, then handed Nneka a knife and a pile of vegetables. You can start by cutting this. Nneka sat down at the table and picked up the knife. It felt strange in her hands. She had never cut vegetables before. Carefully, she tried to slice a tomato, but her movements were slow and clumsy. Ada giggled softly. Madam, you're holding the knife wrong. Nneka flushed. Oh. She tried again, this time following Ada's instructions. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. Kamsi watched her closely. Why are you really here, madam? Nneka sighed, setting down the knife. Because I need to change. And I know that won't happen unless I start doing things differently. Kamsi studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Then keep cutting. Nneka smiled slightly and continued. Later that day, she walked out to the gate where Chief Obinna was sitting under the mango tree. He looked up as she approached. Papa Obinna, she greeted. He nodded. Nneka. She hesitated, then sat down beside him. I helped in the kitchen today, she said. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Did you? Yes. It wasn't easy, but I'm trying. He nodded slowly. That's good. She sighed, picking at her nails. I know I can't undo everything overnight. But I want to be different. I don't want to be the woman I was before. Chief Obinna studied her. Then you must understand something, my daughter. Change is not about one big act. It is about the small things, the everyday things. True kindness is shown in moments when no one is watching. Nneka swallowed. I understand. He nodded, then turned his gaze back to the trees. We shall see. As the days passed, Nneka continued trying to prove herself. She made an effort to greet the staff properly. She tried to help in small ways, whether by carrying her own plate to the sink or offering a kind word to those around her. At first, the staff remained wary. They were used to her cruelty, and they weren't sure if this change was real. But over time, something shifted. One afternoon, as she was wiping the dining table, Ada walked up to her. Madam, she said hesitantly. Nneka looked up. Yes. Ada bit her lip. I just wanted to say. I think you're really trying. Nneka's chest tightened. Thank you, Ada. The younger girl smiled shyly before returning to her work. It was small, but it was something. She was finally earning their trust. That evening, Ikin watched her from a distance. He had seen the way she was trying to change. He had seen her cutting vegetables in the kitchen, speaking softly to the staff, carrying her own things. But he still wasn't sure if it was real. When she walked past him, he finally spoke. Nneka. She turned, surprised. Yes. He hesitated, then sighed. You've been trying. She nodded. I have. There was a long pause. Do you really want to change? He asked. She took a deep breath. Yes. Not just for you, but for myself. Ikin studied her. He wanted to believe her. But trust was not something that could be rebuilt overnight. We'll see, he said finally. Nneka nodded, accepting his words. She knew she still had a long way to go. But for the first time in her life, she was willing to take the journey. The Oji mansion had never felt this different before. The once grand house, filled with coldness and superiority, was now quieter, more grounded. Nneka had spent the last few weeks trying to rebuild what she had destroyed, but she knew that no matter how hard she tried, it was not enough to erase the past. She still caught glimpses of doubt in the staff's eyes. She still saw hesitation in Kamsi's voice whenever they spoke. And worst of all, she still felt the distance between her and Ikin. It was the part that hurt her the most. She had expected that if she changed, if she truly made an effort, he would come back to her. But Ikin had been careful, watching, observing, but never getting too close. It was as if he was afraid to let himself believe in her again. And maybe he was. One evening, after dinner, Neca found Ikin in his study. He was sitting at his desk, his laptop open, but he wasn't working. He was staring at the screen, deep in thought. She knocked softly. "Can we talk?" He sighed and gestured for her to enter. "Go ahead." Neca walked in and sat across from him. She clasped her hands together, trying to calm the nervous energy running through her. "I know I've done terrible things," she began. "And I know that just because I'm trying to change doesn't mean everything will be okay overnight." Ikin didn't say anything, she just watched her carefully. "But I also know that I don't want to be that person anymore," she continued. "I don't want to be the woman who looks down on others. I don't want to be someone who only values people based on what they can give me." Ikin let out a slow breath. "And why do you want to change, Neca?" She met his gaze. "Because I finally see the truth about myself. And I don't like who I was." Silence filled the room. Finally, Ikin leaned back in his chair. "Neca, I see that you've been making an effort. I see that you're trying. And I respect that." Hope flickered in her chest. "Does that mean, but," he interrupted gently, "I don't know if I can ever love you the same way again." The hope crumbled. Her throat tightened. "Ikin." He ran a hand down his face, looking exhausted. "I loved you with all my heart. I thought you were the one person who truly saw me and who loved me for who I was. But after everything I've seen, after the way you treated people, I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Is there nothing I can do?" Ikin was quiet for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "Love isn't just about emotions, Neca. It's about trust, respect, and knowing that the person beside you is someone who will make you better, not someone you have to teach how to be kind." She swallowed hard. "So, what are you saying?" Ikin's voice was soft but firm. "I think it's best if we part ways." Neca's heart shattered. She had known deep down that this might happen. But hearing the words out loud still felt like a knife to the chest. Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I don't want to lose you." Ikin looked at her, sadness in his eyes. "I don't want to be lost, Neca." For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then slowly, Neca nodded. She stood up, wiping her tears. "I understand." Ikin watched her, his expression unreadable. "I hope you continue this journey, even after I'm gone." She forced a small smile. "I will." And for the first time in her life, she truly meant it. A week later, Neca packed her bags and left the Oji mansion. She had insisted on leaving, knowing that staying in the same house with Ikin would only make things harder for both of them. The staff watched her go, some still wary, some hopeful that maybe, just maybe, she had truly changed. Chief Obinna stood by the gate as she walked past. She stopped in front of him, swallowing down the lump in her throat. "Thank you," she said softly. Chief Obinna nodded. "Be well, my daughter." She bowed slightly, a sign of respect she had never given before turning and walking away. As the car pulled away from the mansion, she took one last look at the place that had changed her forever. And then she faced forward. For the first time, she wasn't running away from her past. She was walking toward a better future. Moral lesson: this story wasn't just about exposing someone's true nature, it was about transformation, growth, and the painful realization that not every love story has a happy ending. Nneka learned an important lesson, but the price she paid was high. Ikin, on the other hand, realized that love without respect is meaningless. Sometimes, the greatest gift we can give ourselves is the courage to walk away. I hope you enjoyed the tale. If so, please like the video, comment, share it with your family and friends, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell for more enchanting tales like this one. Goodbye.